Okay, this is a quick review of the Apollo db-36 full-size dirt bike. It says it's a 250. It's actually 223 cc's, air-cooled. I'm comparing this bike really to the Hawk 250, the RPS Ricky's Power Sport Hawk 250, or whatever you want to call it. And this bike has a little bit more power, and it's okay for off-road. The rear suspension I like, it's good. The engine is good. The frame is really strong and really heavy, but I don't mind that. The only thing that I don't like about ripping around on this bike is the front suspension sucks. Worse than almost any other Chinese dirt bike that I've ever been on. I mean, even the little dirt bikes that have a 14-inch rear tire or a 17-inch front tire, they have better suspension than this thing does. This thing like bottoms out and hammers like almost every jump I take it on. And maybe I ride it a little bit harder than it should. I'm used to riding Hondas. But I like to rip on this thing because it gets good mileage. The engine it's a pretty bulletproof design. It's a simple overhead cam design based on, Japanese engines, but it's a good engine. The other thing I like about this bike is that I bought this bike used for $350. Used, not running, $350. It didn't have a carburetor. It didn't have a front tire. Um, or the front tire was messed up. And then I had to replace, so I put on a new front tire myself using a stand that I built. I changed the oil just once, and I fixed the rear brake. That's another thing I like about Chinese bikes. When you buy a master cylinder, a rear master cylinder, a front brake master cylinder, it's like 18, maybe 19, maybe $20 with shipping on eBay. So I put a new rear master cylinder, brake cylinder on the back, and basically, fixed the rear brake. I didn't even have to mess with the caliper. And then on the front, all I did was I replaced I didn't even replace the hose. I just replaced the front master cylinder, and that fixed the brakes. So I fixed both the brakes. I put the Mikuni BM26 30mm carburetor that everybody in the world that knows anything about Chinese bikes already knows about. With this bike, since when I got it, the whole airbox was like burnt to a crisp. It was like there was a gas fire in the bike somewhere. That's why I got it for so cheap. The engine wasn't damaged, so I had to take the whole airbox out, and I just put the Mikuni carburetor and bought the one that comes with its own little air filter. But like I was saying, like I just took this bike out and I was ripping around on it, and I actually have a lot of fun on it, despite the fact that the front suspension isn't what it is. I mean, I've been trying to sell my more expensive toys and just chill out a little bit so I don't kill myself. But this bike is a lot of fun to rip around on. It's really heavy, but it's still a lot of fun if you can get over the fact that every time you go on like a kind of a medium-sized jump that you're going to bottom out or hit anything big, your front suspension's going to bottom out. So I've been, I think I measured really quick. It's like 48 millimeters up here. This one is obviously, actually I don't know if I didn't measure that one, but there's a few shocks like YZF 450, 250, or excuse me, YZ250F that have the same size shock. I think the CRF 450 that has like 47 millimeters. So there's a chance I might be able to take some forks off one of those bikes and put them on here, but honestly, it's probably not worth it. It's probably best just to buy a Japanese bike rather than trying to take expensive. One of them fork sets off eBay is going to be like $300. So it's like, well, dude, if you bought a whole bike for $350 and spent $70 on a carburetor, then what's the point? Like just get the YZF, the YZ250F or whatever, and use it. The biggest thing that I like about this bike is on liquid-cooled 4-stroke Japanese bikes or 2-stroke Japanese bikes, they have so much power that every time I get on them, I'm just like tempted. I'm just like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm just like tempted, and I feel like I'm gonna hurt myself on it going too fast. So this one, you don't really have you have enough power to do stuff, and a lot of people would probably disagree with me on that. But for myself, I'm in my 40s now. I'm kind of like, all right, it's enough power for me to have fun on. It's enough for me to hit whatever type of lift, with as much speed as I want to on it. It accelerates quick enough for me. It's not like a 14, 17 pit bike with a 125cc engine. It has 17 kilowatts of power, whatever that equates out to. Honestly, this is what I don't get. They say these engines have between 12 and 17 horsepower. The engine is only 223 cubic centimeters. So you take a lawnmower engine with like 190 cc's, and they call it a 5 horsepower or a 6 horsepower. So, right, how do you get, like 12 or 15, or I don't even know what they say, like over 15 horsepower from just just over 200 cc's. I don't know, but the bike has enough power for me. I like it. One of the reasons I got it for so cheap was the fact that when I got it, this metal gas tank, which is prone to leaks, had like if someone had taken a hammer to it, or the bike had been crashed, and it had a huge dent in it. So I ended up putting it on my trailer and making a rebar hook and hooking the rebar hook up to a come along, and I come along the dent out of the gas tank. But by the time I finished doing all that, the top of it, the top gas nozzle part was so mangled that I just had to take a piece of 14 gauge sheet metal that I had and weld it onto the top, and then weld a 1-inch pipe nipple that I had in the garage that I got from like a renter or something onto that, and then I put this is my 1-inch steel nipple that I welded on there. And the gas tank when I got the bike had like rainwater in it and stuff, so I didn't have to worry about like welding it. But I put this PVC cap on it. I was gonna do something else. When I got it, the handlebars were all like screwed up. I cut the handlebars into pieces and used them to actually fix the exhaust on a 1417 125cc pit bike that I bought from the same guy. But these handlebars were like all messed up and bent. You can tell this is like longer than the other. But yeah, I put new handlebars on it, a new front tire, and I've just been ripping around on it. And some of the bolts fell out because I didn't have Loctite on them. And changed the oil, and then had to change or fix the tube in the rear tire, but it doesn't matter because I built that tire stand and I've got tire springs, and now I know how to change motorcycle tires now. But the bike's pretty badass. And the rear master cylinder that it had on it was really cheap. It didn't even have a reservoir. Maybe they're not supposed to, but I bought one of the more expensive, or actually cheap, a cheap one that had the reservoir, and I just had the reservoir. A lot of plastic's done. Another thing I did, I like. I can't show you this right now, but I could. I just built a piece of metal. I built 3 pieces of metal, 1, 2, 3, with bands of metal that I got from a shipping container, and I just bent them and welded them together. And then I cut this piece of plastic out from a Rubbermaid crate that I had, or basket, and I just made this cowling thing. I guess you can't really see it in there that well, but you can kind of see this piece of metal right here. I don't know if that's something you should do, like make your own plastics. If you make your own plastics, that's fine, but you probably shouldn't put pieces of steel back there like I did. But other than that, I'm pretty happy with this bike. I mean, I didn't really do a whole lot to it, and it runs. And one of the cool things about these motorcycles is cheap availability of spare parts. That engine right there is a 223 or 250 CDI Chinese engine. You could buy a new piston with a new cylinder for I think around $100 off eBay on it, and it just makes it very easy to work on. And I'm not worried about breaking anything on the bike. It is just really fun to ride, and I think that the other reason that it boils down to being really fun to ride is that the bike is reliable, but it is also expendable, which means I can beat the crap out of it, go through the woods on it, and if I think I'm going to hit a tree branch, or crash the bike in the woods or whatever, or hit some concrete jump too big or whatever, I'm just like, dude, it's a Chinese bike. I didn't pay that much money for it, and it's pretty strong. It's pretty durable. Like I said, it's reliable. It's expendable, but it is strong as crap because of the steel frame right here. All these components here are pretty thick gauge steel. The swing arm is thick gauge steel. Unlike the RPS Hawk 250, this swing arm, it has like a Honda Pro Link linkage on it, which makes the rear suspension pretty cool. It's not just the spring directly connected to the rear swing arm, so it's a pretty strong frame. I mean, you can really beat on it, and it's gonna, hold up to whatever. And if you're like me and you have a MIG welder that you keep flux core steel line in, you can fix pretty much anything you want to around the garage, including old dirt bikes if you break the frame or break the kickstand thing off the frame, which I've done in the past. But yeah, spare parts availability, and it's just kick-ass. And well, now that the plastic and the battery and all that crap isn't in there, and I have to kickstart it every time, I could put a battery with a new solenoid in there if I needed to, but I can see everything in there, and there's not a whole lot to worry about. There's no, like, bells and whistles on it. It's just, turn the on switch on and grab it and kick it a few dozen times to get it to start if it's cold, and you go. And it's kind of fun. But like I said before, I mean, the bike retails new for around $1,900 or $2,000. They could have spent a $5 or $6 extra and made the front forks like 100 times better just by putting, like, I mean, I don't know about fork construction, but, like, dude, if you've already got two sliding pieces of metal, I mean, and you're going to copy Japanese engine design, well, you could copy a more recent, Japanese fork design and make your forks 100 times better just by putting a few tiny little metal components in them that would make them more like a modern fork. So anyways, if Apollo or anybody else listens to me on that one, and I'm sure, all the Chinese motorcycle manufacturers actually are improving and making their stuff better and better every year to the point where in 5, maybe 10 or 15 or 20 years, their stuff will be just as good as the Japanese stuff. This air-cooled engine is just about as good as the old Japanese air-cooled engines. A lot of people would disagree with me on that. They'd tell you that the old Honda XR250R or XR400R or XR600 or XR200 is basically a bulletproof engine design, and I'm kind of saying, hey, this is basically made out of the same metal, this exact same design, and it's pretty good stuff. So I can't think of what else I'd like to say about this except that build your own tire changing stand, and you can, every time you get a pop tube or whatever, it's not that hard to change your own tires. But yeah, front forks, easily replaceable stuff. This shock, I haven't, in comparison to my CRF 450R, yeah, even the rear suspension on this thing sucks, but the rear suspension does a lot better and handles a lot bigger jumps and harder landings than the front suspension does, for sure. And the chain on this, compared to the RPS Hawk 250, this chain is a 520 chain. It's a lot beefier, a lot thicker. And also the rear wheel chain tightening and rear wheel adjustment mechanism back here is way better than the Hawk 250. The Hawk 250 really skimped on that. So this bike for off-roading is a lot better for off-roading, but I almost feel like the Hawk 250 suspension is the same, if not better, than the front suspension on this bike. I can't believe it's like, you basically, you have an inverted front fork and it just sucks so bad. I mean, honestly, I feel like a Honda, whatever, like 50cc motorcycle would have better front suspension than this thing. That's okay. I still have fun on it. It cost me $350 for the whole bike, so I don't know how I got that miracle deal on it, but so this was missing. I had to weld this together and do a few other odds and ends on this thing to get it running, but hey, it was fun. And I love pulling bits out of metal. It's just a little hobby of mine, so I got to have fun removing this gas tank, and I got to weld it. And I just love welding gas tanks because that's a really smart thing to do. But yeah, if you're thinking about getting one of these, I don't know, talk to your buddies about what they think about, Chinese bikes versus Japanese bikes. Buying a used Japanese bike might be a better choice for you. I've ridden a lot of stuff, and I like having expendable, durable stuff that I can, replace the parts really cheap on, personally. A lot of people might disagree, and I might go back to getting an XR400. But I hope that this video is informative for whoever, and have a good one.